Hello, writers. Welcome to episode number 27 of How Do You Write? And today I have a very special guest. Joanna Penn is on the show today. If you listen to writing podcasts, I'm sure that you know Joanna Penn already. She's a delight and sweet and funny and optimistic, and I love listening to her show, The Creative Penn. So I was super stoked that she came on this show to talk about how she writes. Just a little bit of catch up before we get into the interview. I have been working hard at plotting the next book, the thriller, and I've also been working really hard on the next Patreon essay. For those of you who don't know, I offer a series of essays on the creative life. I offer those to patrons over at patreon.com/Rachael. And I really take those essays seriously. I do not toss them off lightly. People give me hard-earned dollars to do this, and that's really important. I don't want to let anyone down. I put a lot of time and energy and effort into these things. So the one I'm working on right now is about, it's kind of meta. It's about the cult of creativity and the way we commodify creativity. I inspect and kind of take apart what is creative and what isn't creative. Is going to the craft store and buying two things that are meant to stick together with glue. Is that creative? Is a paint by numbers kit creative? Why or why not? It's been kind of a fascinating essay to write, and it does feel a little bit meta because I do accept patronage in the form of tips per essay, writing about creativity, and I'm talking about the cult of it. But a few months ago, my sister and I went to a crazy ass, air quotes, creativity conference, and it blew my mind the way people take other people's hard-earned money in order just to tell them that they have a little bit of creativity in their body, and then they prescribe how to use that creativity. And that just pissed me off. I think that everyone is creative. I think that being creative is not necessarily an easy thing to do. But it certainly doesn't require the exact right pen. It doesn't require the set of tools and instructions TM by a certain celebrity guru. Being creative is something that comes from your heart, something that you identify, that you define for yourself. So I've really been having a good time swimming around in this essay, spending time on it. And actually that brings me to an important point. Thank you to all my patrons, especially my two new patrons, Robert Eggers and Janice D. What your dollar tip or $3 tip, whatever it is, per essay means to me is it's a vote of confidence. It helps me have the time to do the work. And to every patron, I am so very grateful to you, and you are so very important to me. So thank you for that. Let's jump right into the interview. Joanna is just such a delight. Please enjoy. Well, I could not be more pleased today to welcome Joanna Penn to the podcast. I'm a huge fan of Joanna, and I'm just so thrilled that she's here. For people who don't know Joanna, let me give a little bio first. She also goes by J.F.Penn. That's her fiction writing name. She is the New York Times and USA bestselling author of Thrillers on the Edge, as well as bestselling nonfiction for authors published under Joanna Penn. Joanna's site for writers, thecreativepenn.com, has been voted one of the top 10 sites for writers 3 years running. She's a professional speaker on creative entrepreneurship, digital publishing, and internet marketing, and was voted one of the Guardian UK Top 100 Creative Professionals of 2013. And Joanna, you're just such a delight to listen to on your podcast, The Creative Penn. Welcome.
Oh. Well, thanks so much for having me, Rachel. It's great to be on the show.
I have to tell you that I have, life gets busy and sometimes I miss a podcast or two, but I've been teaching this memoir class at Stanford, which is about an hour away from my house. So for this last semester that I go once a week in this long drive, I am completely caught up. I'm very invested in your trip that you got back from and how you got sick. And I've just been really enjoying having the time to catch up on all the podcasts. So thank you for that.
Oh, no worries. This is what happens with podcasts. You will realize this over time. Like you start something and you think, oh, I'll just give it a go. And then like, what am I on, year 7 or something?
Well, and you and I started out the same time too. I wrote my first book in 2006 as a NaNoWriMo, and that was the first one to sell to HarperCollins. So we've kind of been on the same track. You've been doing it full-time longer, and I've only been doing it this year full-time.
Oh,
but
good.
super exciting. Well, let's just jump right into your writing process, because you have that interesting challenge that you do have to balance your fiction writing, content creation, as well as your nonfiction. What is the best time of day for you to write, and where do you write?
So I write creatively in the mornings. So I'm definitely a morning person, do it before you do anything else type of thing.
Yeah.
But for nonfiction, for blog posts, that type of thing, I can do that in the afternoon or later on. But certainly that creative stuff for me, I'm definitely a morning person. And like this is the latest I would do in an evening. So I tend to keep my evenings free because I really love to sleep.
Me too. I'm so glad somebody has said that. I worked 911 for 17 years, and so I didn't sleep for about 17 years. And since I've gone full time, I average 9 hours of sleep a night.
I am the same. And I actually think, like, especially with fiction, I think fiction is very tiring. And they say that, we can only make a certain number of decisions per day and we run out of willpower in this. When you're writing fiction, you're making decisions for your characters. So that's why I think fiction is so tiring. And it's much more tiring than nonfiction. And I love both. And I use nonfiction as a palate cleanser, I say. And also I think it helps people in a different way. But certainly fiction, I find, is very tiring. So I would say, to listeners, 8-9 hours sleep. Sometimes I sleep 11 hours and I'm happy to. It's probably one of my productivity tips is sleep.
Yeah. Well, but it is a hot button topic for so many people because so many people get offended when you say that. Like, oh,
really?
Well, yeah, I've had people, I never sleep more than 5 or 6 hours a night. I'm like, but I want to sleep 9 hours, and I finally can. I love hearing that about the fiction. I absolutely agree with that. How do you write? Are you longhand, computer? I know you have been playing with dictation.
Well, I need to get back to dictation, but I have one here. So I have the Moleskine journals behind me on the video. I have a lot of journals I've been writing over the years, and I don't write them like in sentences. They're mainly notes and thoughts and stuff like that. But in terms of actually my books, I write into Scrivener. So I've been using Scrivener. My very first book I did on Word and it was awful. And since I've been using Scrivener, it's just been amazing. So I'm a huge fan of the way that you can drag and drop the different documents and the chapters. I don't write in order. So it's really, and especially nonfiction, again, you really need to, you never write in order for nonfiction. And with fiction, I tend to not to either. So I love using Scrivener. And it's probably the cheapest software that changes so many lives. It's like $49 or something.
And I use it for everything. I use it for my books. I use it for my classes. I organize my classes in it. I organize large projects within it for the same reason. And it's so inexpensive. Now, have you tried the Evernote Live Scribe pen to write in your Moleskine?
No, I have looked at the various, I've tried Evernote a couple of times and I just haven't gelled with it.
It doesn't make sense to me. I think you have to. Yeah, I want to use it too, but I think Scrivener is a good replacement, and I just keep notes per project within Scrivener. And I use the Things app, which is on my phone and is also syncs to the desktop I have a fiction ideas folder. So if I'm out and about, I'll just type things, quotes or things I see or ideas into that app. If I don't have a notebook handy, I'll also take pictures and save them to Pinterest or, that type of thing. So I think you have to find your own system and force it. Like if you try a system and it just doesn't work for you after a couple of days, don't do it. Now, and dictation's interesting because I want dictation to work for me. And I did Destroyer of Worlds by dictating the first draft, but End of Days I just wrote. I typed. And so I want to get back to dictation in 2017. That's another goal. I wrote a whole book in dictation, and it was really difficult, and I want to do more of it. I got one of those LiveScribe pens because I thought it was so great.
Cool.
It's basically got an upload feature, and then you swipe it, and it converts to text, which you can put anywhere. But it just wasn't my system. And the pen, the expensive pen, is in the drawer sitting next to me.
Yeah.
I'll never use it. So
I just use a cheap biro in my expensive moleskin.
I use a cheap plastic mechanical pencil. Yeah. And how do you refill the creative well when you are running dry?
Well, I try not to run dry. And I think by not running dry, you have to go to a lot of things. Well, for me, obviously, I'm always reading. So I read a lot of nonfiction around the topic. So at the moment, I've got an idea for a new series that's around cartography, so maps and things. Yeah, and who knew, like the depth of cartography on the internet? It's amazing. So I'm reading a lot of books on that. I've just discovered that you can output your Kindle notes to a PDF.
Isn't that cool? It's love amazing. That.
So I read on the Kindle, like the book I just finished, I've just printed it out here, is about a guy who went around stealing maps from museums, and really interesting. Like,
wait, it's nonfiction?
Yes, nonfiction. Yes, this is a non-fiction book, and people just going into old libraries and cutting out maps from. I know, and I'm like, wow, that's really interesting, and just kind of learning about that. So I've bought a lot of books, and I'm going to the library, and there's a map shop near me. That's the thing that's given me the idea. So I went in and had a chat to them, and I'm going to go to I'm going to an exhibition this weekend on cartography. So basically, the biggest thing is following your curiosity and filling the creative well early enough. Like, I'm just about to start editing End of Days, which is my next Arcane book, but that's now in editing phase. And this won't be the next book I write, but in about 2 books time, this is the stuff that I will use. So I'm filling my mind now and writing notes and thinking about it. And I try not to let books bleed into each other, but they definitely have in many ways. But the ideas for this cartography based series I'll just percolate them and put stuff in my head. And then at some point it will come out again. So I travel a lot. As well. I was in Israel a couple of weeks ago, as you said, got ill, but still had a good time. And yeah, so I constantly am sort of doing things and reading things and watching things that will be interesting for stories.
I'm constantly grateful at how much information there is out there, and that when we are following this curiosity, we can just roll around in the ideas that we get caught up in. That's just beautiful. What is the worst writing advice you've ever been given?
So I think the worst writing advice, and of course everyone gets the same advice generally.
Yeah,
I think,
they do.
Yeah, they do. Is write what you know. I think that is the worst advice, because it should be write what you're interested in learning about. Yeah. And it's kind of crazy to me because, like End of Days, I decided that the book should be called End of Days. And then, of course, that has some things around it, like apocalyptic ideas. And then I started to get into snake handling and venom, and how you can actually use venom to have these hallucinations. And so I started going down again a rabbit hole of how venom's used in these people who inject themselves on purpose in order to, not die when they get actually bitten, and the snake handling cults in America, in the Appalachian Mountains. And I'm like watching these YouTube videos and, okay, I didn't know anything about this whole serpent stuff and herpetology and toxins, and I've learned all of that. And of course, that's research. That's not, the book is not a non-fiction book about that. But the stuff I found in that, doing that research, like the different types of snakes that would come into people's names, that's just something really cool that you can do when you find out this type of thing. So I think write what you know is the worst advice, and it should be write what you're interested in and what you want to learn about. Of course, I think write what you know is probably the emotional side. So you obviously, friendship and love and pain and all of that can come on one level. But still, I've written mixed race male characters. My guy Blake Daniel, he's a psychic, who's been abused in many ways. I've written the death of a child. I'm happily child free, haven't experienced that. So I just think, just have some empathy and, go down that curiosity wormhole on the internet.
Sometimes I just feel guilty at how much fun we get to have going down those rabbit holes. Like we have an excuse. Other people, it might be a time suck, but for us, it's actually research, this fascinating thing I'm looking at on YouTube.
Exactly.
And what secret writing tip of awesomeness did you discover the hard way?
Well, I think it's related in that trusting your curiosity. So, for example, Desecration was the 5th book I wrote, my 5th novel. It was like the 8th book I wrote in total. And Desecration was the first book I was really honest about what I was curious about. So it's got a lot more about death culture, about tattoos, body modification, human anatomy, what happens to the physical body after we die, like really big questions that I was exploring myself. And why do we care what happens to the physical flesh when we die? Yeah. Why are we weirded out? Because we know that when you die, that's not the person.
You're not in there. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not in there. We know that. So why are we so and this whole idea came from a museum I went to, an anatomy museum, and seeing all the body parts in jars. And I was like, why do I feel so weird about that? And I started to get into it, and then this whole story kind of arrived. But okay, in terms of the tip, trusting the curiosity. So I thought at the time when I had this experience in this anatomy museum, I thought, what I'm thinking is wrong in some way. It's weird. People don't want to know about anatomy. They don't want to know about tattoos, body modification. They don't want to know that stuff. They're not interested. And of course, what I've learned is that there are always people who are interested in the stuff you're into. Yeah. And the only way you can attract those people is by writing the stuff you love.
Right.
So I attract people to J.F.Penn who like Stephen King, or who like the darker side of fiction. Unlike you with your lovely, lovely books.
Oh my! Well, my more literary books are really, really dark. And
your covers are so friendly.
I know they are friendly. The women's fiction though is just everybody dies, the kids die, and the characters die, and for the same thing though, because I'm chasing this interest of mine. That always ends up in these darker places that all of us want to really explore.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually thinking, I haven't even talked about this on my own podcast, but I'm thinking of, I have talked about the darkness, the shadow, but I'm actually thinking of writing a non-fiction book about how you can use the shadow in your writing.
I think you should.
I think it's so important. I feel more and more that authors are not trusting the darkness that they can use in their writing. There are some authors who do it very well, but most authors will kind of deny it and think that horror writers are somehow wrong. But actually, the most kind of normal and lovely people I know are horror writers, and I think it's because they put all of their shadow on the page.
I see that in you. I see that in myself. My darkness goes to the page, but that's maybe because we've looked at it in the face and are perhaps a little bit less scared of it. There are some people who can't talk about that kind of thing, can't look at it. And then when you read a book, you can feel it when the author is too scared to approach it, and it's a missed opportunity, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as writers, we have a responsibility to tackle the topics that other people don't necessarily want to in a story. Right. So they don't have to read a book on what happens to the body after we die. Right. They actually get to read like a murder mystery, and you can come in at an angle and
it's
kind
safe.
of change. Yeah, it's safe, and you change their thought process. So I think anyway, I think it's great that you feel the same way.
I love that. Can you give us a quick craft tip of any sort?
Again, kind of related to research and idea, like getting ideas, and that is go along to exhibitions at museums, because you get a curated experience of a topic that often has really interesting little things that you can, because a lot of people I know can't travel, can't spend 2 weeks in Israel. They don't have the money or don't, feel it's unsafe or whatever, or just don't want to do it. Fair enough. But a lot of the time you can go to a local exhibition at a local museum, or that's a couple of hours away or whatever, or take a day trip on a train, and go do this. So for example, the British Museum, which is in London now, I live a couple of hours away now, so not so close, but the British Museum has been in so many of my books. And one particular exhibition, which was on religious relics several years ago now, is in my book Crypt of Bone. And the actual scene, the two characters are walking through the exhibition and basically trying to, it was so macabre. The whole thing was just gory. Relics are bits of bone from
I love relics.
People who were killed for religion. It's pieces of their bone and their blood. It's really weird. And this place was full of weird body parts. Again, I keep coming back to body parts, clearly. But it was, so that was Crypt of Bone, I think, that book. And then Day of the Vikings half of it is set in the British Museum based on a Viking exhibition I went to. I just wrote a short story from a Sunken Egypt exhibition. Blake Daniel, one of my London psychic characters, he works at the British Museum. So basically, if you can find, and in fact, one day in New York, I start at one of the museums there. Can't remember the name of it now, but there's just so many things when knowledge is curated, and it's very surprising. So you don't have to do all the hard work. Like sometimes, like we talked about with research, once you know what you're looking for, you can head down this rabbit hole. But why I like the curated exhibition, like I'm going to this exhibition this weekend at the British Library on maps and cartography. I don't know what to search for yet. So I'm going to go along. I'll probably buy some of their books. I'll take notes, and then I'll know what to look for, and I'll get ideas. So I would say that's a really important thing. And the other thing I would say is balance consumption and creation. So I see too many authors reading hundreds of books on writing, but not actually writing, or, spending a year researching and not writing. And you have to get that balance between consumption and creation, and if you don't get that, you will not be a successful author.
I see a similar thing too, where a lot of people are trying to do the creation and they're reading all the books on writing, but they forget to read the books that excite them, the fiction that they want to write. What are the books that challenge you and excite you, and that I usually take more away from those books than I do from any craft book, actually being in the genre. Thank you, that's wonderful. If you were starting over if on really bad days, if you couldn't write, you couldn't have your business, you were not Joanna Penn or J.F.Penn, what job would you take?
I wouldn't take a job.
No one's ever said that. That's a good answer.
I'm an entrepreneur.
You would make something.
I'd start my own business.
What do you think it would be?
Yeah, well, the thing is, I had so many failures in my career. Like, I had a scuba diving business. I thought running a scuba diving business would be the best thing because I'd get to go scuba diving, which I used to love a lot when I didn't live in England. But basically, that was a terrible choice that's an example of doing a job because you think it's your passion, and then realizing that your passion can't be a job. And a lot of writers need to realize that. I mean, you've gone full time now. As soon as you make writing your job, there are a whole lot of things you've got to do around running a business that you didn't expect. Yeah. So you actually have to be an entrepreneur too, which is why most writers should probably keep their day jobs. But I am actually an entrepreneur. I'm someone who loves doing this. So I would start another business. I seriously don't know what I would do, but I would not go back to having a job. I can't have people telling me what to do.
I have only had it this year, and it's so amazing. It's so amazing that no one's telling me what to do.
And you have to tell yourself what to do because you have to put food on the table.
Yeah, I'm one of those people who gets up and works, and you have to pry the work out of my hands at the end of the day. That's hard. That's a hard thing to manage.
So basically, and also you said on really bad days, I seriously don't have bad days anymore. And I know that, and I have days when I get really angry and frustrated. Like, for example, there was a thing about EU VAT tax, which, I mean, seriously, why am I dealing with that? But I have to because it's part of business. And I just got really angry. And what I did was I went for a walk. And I do find that sometimes that's the way to, it's like, get some perspective on the world. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? You get this VAT wrong, and then you have to pay some money at some other point. And But I do think that taking a break and going for a walk is really important. But I was really miserable in my previous job. You know, I got to the point of crying at work, and I just hated it. I was paid really good money and I hated it, and I thought my life was pointless. So when I get angry and frustrated with some of the things that we have to do as authors, and it's never the creation process, it's like, what would it be? Like, I've just been loading print stuff onto Ingram Spark. I really don't like doing that.
Yeah.
But I'm a publisher. I have to do that type of thing. And that's like an admin type task, you know, but I'm like, this is so much better, or dealing with EU VAT is so much better than my old job. So basically, I can't answer that question.
Well, I think I really appreciate that about your podcast, is that you are having as much fun as I am every day. That I was on an earlier radio show, and the guy, he was testing the levels of the mic, and he said, okay, while we're testing the levels of your mic, can you tell us about your commute to work? And I said, well, I walked into the kitchen and I poured a cup of coffee and I walked through the living room and into my office. He's like, oh no, you're going to have to tell us some more. If you were starting over as a new writer right now, what advice would you give yourself as a baby writer?
Well, I was thinking about this, and what made the biggest difference to me, and in fact, I don't think I was a writer before this happened. I was at Sydney Writers Festival, and I can't remember what year it was now. I think it must have been like 2006 or 5 or something like that, 4 maybe, like a while ago. And up until that point, I had been reading a lot about writing and I'd been journaling. But what they did in that, so I'd gone to this workshop. It was meant to be like a workshop or a seminar on writing, on plot or character or something. And I went along ready to take notes, like a good learning writer does, you know, write notes. And the guy said, okay, you've got 10 minutes and here's a writing prompt. I think he said something like, and I remember exactly what I wrote about. He said, write about the moment when you realized. And that was it. The moment when you realized. And I'm being very honest on your shows because you're so nice. I wrote, and then he said, you have 10 minutes, go. And so this was the first timed writing I'd ever done.
Wow.
And I just went, what? You want me to write?
To actually write?
I'm here to take notes. You're meant to tell me like how I write a scene or whatever. I'm taking, and he said, right. And when he said, tell me when you knew, and I still remember it. I was married before. I'm on my second marriage. And my first husband, I remember the moment I walked down the gangplank of our boat and saw him with another woman. And I didn't learn about what happened for months, but I was looking back, that's the moment I knew. And I wrote this in this exercise, and it changed my life. It changed my life because it was timed writing. Now, and so this is the real thing. It's not about like getting divorced or anything. It is that you have to write, and timed writing sessions changed my life because then that's all I do. And so 1, set a timer. Like, well, 1, schedule the time. 2, set a timer and write. And 3, sit with the discomfort of, you know, you will feel like, well, what do I write? And you just have to start typing, but you're not allowed to do anything else in that period. So I would just say to myself, like, seriously, I mean, I'm 41. I could have started this career when I was 18 or earlier if I had just gotten over that taking notes versus actually doing some writing. So yeah, that's probably what I would tell myself. Do
you remember who the instructor was in that session?
Not at all.
Wouldn't that be neat if you could drop him or her a note and say, that silly exercise literally put me in this place? And I think it's
really important. I mean, I know you teach, and I don't do so much now, but I try, you know, I do courses and stuff, but I do some live events. And it's always amazing when you get an email. In fact, I just got a letter in the post. Like
I love that.
I know, from a podcast listener saying that I changed his life with this one particular thing. And the thing is, we never know. Right. Like, we never know what's going to impact people. You just have to be honest and like put yourself out there. And you like Desecration, for example, that book, that series doesn't sell well at all. It is not commercial. It falls through every genre gap possible. But when people love it, they really love it. And I get the most emails about those books because they're deep, because they go into the heart of humanity. So yeah, I think all of these things, I would just say to myself, timed writing and like emotional honesty and what you love, just put it all in there.
I
and
honestly
it will
think
resonate.
Those 3 things can start an entire career. The authenticity, the timed writing, and just do the work. That's all you need.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Thank you, Joanna. That's so
Don't worry.
Perfect. and where can listeners find you? What's the best place?
Okay. They can find
places.
me. There are many places, but for most authors, thecreativepenn.com, Penn, and Penn with a double N is my real name. It is not a pen name. So yeah, thecreativepenn.com. There's a podcast there. It's episode 300 now, so lots of stuff if people like to listen to my voice. Also on Twitter at The Creative Penn. The author blueprint is free, and at thecreativepenn.com/blueprint. And I was also going to say, because you said, what do you want to plug right now?
Please plug away.
So I am just about to go into the studio to record The Successful Author Mindset as an audiobook. And it's interesting because that's probably the nonfiction book that has resonated most with my audience. And again, because it contains excerpts from my journals from the last 10 years. And there are bits in there, like, for example, my first novel, I cancelled my launch drinks because I was so devastated. Like, there was just this feeling. I mean, you know what I mean, right?
Oh yes.
And I was so paralyzed by fear and all kinds of things. Yeah. So that book, This Successful Author Mindset, is an ebook print and audiobook and a workbook. And I think that is the thing I want people to, if you need help with like the mindset, I would love you to just go and check that out, because we all suffer from it, right? Even though I'm on book number 22 or whatever, and you've written the same number of books. I mean, we still get that. There's self-doubt and all kinds of issues. And we sound so mature because we've been doing this so long.
But it's hard. It's hard when you're starting. And the fact is, it's hard when you're not starting. It's hard every day, but it's the good kind of hard.
The good hard. Exactly.
It's what we choose. I want to be challenged. The book I'm starting to write next is something I've never even thought about tackling. And I just can't wait because it's going to be so difficult. So
yay! Difficult. I feel the same about this kind of darkness one. Like, it's completely nebulous idea, but I've been thinking about it for ages, and now I'm like, do you know what? I should probably tackle that. Like, and I will have to go deep, but that might be really valuable. So yeah, good on us for 2017.
Well, what a treat and delight it has been to speak to you. Thank you for giving so generously of your time, and I will be listening in the car in California, driving through San Francisco.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Rachel.
Thanks, Joanna. Great. Take care.